What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome back to another miniature rescue. This week, we're rescuing a lone space marine who's seen better days and could use some serious attention. There's a question that comes up pretty frequently in this hobby. One that feels oddly at odds with how popular Warhammer is in general and miniature painting. It's not that this question defines the hobby, but it's one that lingers. That question is, are Space Marines cool? I find myself asking this question a lot for one reason or another. When I talk to other hobbyists, there doesn't really seem to be a clear answer. We'll get excited about the incredible visuals of Space Marines in art or media, but then somehow the conversation almost always turns to, but Space Marines are awful, or they're the worst, right? Something along those lines. So why does it matter? Here's the thing, it doesn't, honestly, it really doesn't. More specifically, it doesn't matter what other people think if your opinion is different than theirs. Space Marines can be amazing or the absolute worst, but either way, they're a central part of this hobby. Without them, miniature wargaming probably wouldn't be what it is today. Whether you love or loathe them, Space Marines are icons in miniature wargaming. Personally, I think I'm still kind of on the fence. There's a lot about Space Marines that I appreciate. The older models, the books, the classic supplements, all of those things that originally drew me into this hobby, and they have a certain nostalgic magic. I remember being completely captivated when I saw them. Maybe it's nostalgia, or maybe it was the thrill of discovery back then, but even now, there are moments, those small, shining examples that make me want to really like Space Marines. And then there are those moments that just don't. It's strange, feeling both drawn to something and ambivalent about it at the same time. But at the end of the day, there are some truly epic Space Marine models, and I like to paint some models. Speaking of which, this little Space Marine from the 2nd edition era is in such desperate need of a rescue that I can't help but feel for him. I love the classic vibrant colors here. It's clear that the original painter really tried to push their skills with highlighting and shading, all without doing any metallics on this particular model, reaching for something ambitious even if they didn't quite hit the mark. So today, whether you love Space Marines or can't stand them, this little guy is going into the Sonic Cleaner. We're going to bring him back to his former glory and hopefully get him looking the way that the original painter intended. But before we get to that, let me tell you about today's excellent sponsor. FLEXISPOT just sent over their C7 ergonomic chair to replace the super old and busted chair that I've been using at my painting desk. Let's take a look and see how this chair can help you be in a better position to paint some minis. The chair has a ton of features, and a lot of them, while usually being pointed out for 9-to-5 job applications, clearly translate into the miniature painting experience. Here's some notable things that I've discovered. And my old chair was actually making it really hard to go for long stretches of painting, even short ones, really uncomfortable. Batch painting or even just trying to relax, my old chair just wasn't doing me any favors. The C7 on the other hand feels good right when I sit down. And it's weird because I realized that I stopped thinking about being in the chair as soon as I got to work, whereas my old busted one, I was constantly trying to adjust and get into a better position to feel comfortable while painting. Partially, that's due to the material that it's made of, but also the back support that automatically adjusts with my movements to keep me sitting properly and in an ergonomic position. I could feel it holding me in the right spot, and I've been able to just sit back and relax in it. Especially when painting for longer sessions, I don't have to take breaks nearly as often or stretch or walk around. The 3D armrests in particular are so good. They can move up and down, in and out, and swivel, so finding the proper height and placement for my elbows really helped me lock down on the models. I wasn't trying to fight my chair to get into the proper position to paint things like eyes. And that's something we often don't think about when we actually go to paint, how much that's affecting us. A chair is not the first thing we think of when upgrading our hobby spaces. Probably one of the last things we actually do think about. But being comfortable and able to steady yourself really helps when you're trying to get a lot done. Or just being more precise and not hurt. I mean, this thing even has a footrest. So if you're the kind of person who likes to sit back and paint, this chair is a fantastic option for that. This is definitely an upgrade from my old chair, and even better is FLEXISPOT's 30-day return policy that is paired with a 10-year warranty. So you can try it out for yourself and know that you're going to be covered. FLEXISPOT's Black Friday sale is coming, and you can grab the best discount on FLEXISPOT, including standing desks, ergonomic chairs, and more. If you use my code down in the description and the pinned comment below, you can save an extra $50 on the C7 chair. You also have the opportunity to win a free order on select upcoming dates. Treat yourself to a comfortable workstation this Black Friday with FLEXISPOT. Thanks again, FLEXISPOT, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to that Space Marine. To strip the paint from this model, I'm going to try something a little bit differently. Now normally, I use a concentrated degreaser called LA's Totally Awesome, and it lives up to its name. Works incredibly well at removing paint, especially when used in an ultrasonic cleaner. Today though, I'm using a glass jar filled with isopropyl alcohol. I'm placing this jar inside the ultrasonic cleaner with water surrounding it instead of LA's Totally Awesome. For safety's sake, I wouldn't recommend this method. Isopropyl alcohol is highly flammable. A concentrated degreaser works really well and is much safer, but this is something that people have suggested, so here we are. After just a few minutes, I can already see the paint starting to come off. After about 15 minutes, it's time to see how well the isopropyl worked. The paint has softened almost instantly thanks to the sonic cleaner, making the model look like it has a almost second skin. I kind of want to leave it like this too, just preserved on a shelf for years to come, but this model has a purpose, so we're going to move forward. Barely touching the model with my toothbrush, the paint just falls off. I'm hardly putting any pressure on the brush. The bristles are doing all of the work. With the model clean, we can inspect the damage. There's the usual mold line cleanup to tackle, but the weapon is especially puzzling to me. It's not even pointed in the right direction, and it looks like the arms were actually meant for heavy weapons, something like a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher. For reasons we can only guess, this guy was likely thrown together to get one more Marine on the table with whatever spare parts were lying around. I'm planning to straighten out the gun and clean up the excess glue. And I'll start by removing the mold lines with an X-Acto knife and sanding sticks, then cut away the gun to check the situation underneath. There's quite a bit of old glue behind the gun, probably to make sure that it's stuck on, but it's filled in parts of the Aquila and the belt. This model may have also been damaged before, and the gun was added to cover it up, which kind of makes sense considering how it's put together. I'll clean up the glue and reattach the gun. This way it still feels like the original model, but with a cleaner surface for paint. With the cleanup done, it's time for that paint. I'll start with a black primer, then layer on a dark blue, focusing it from the top down to give more shadow. I'll follow with a bright blue for highlights, mostly on the shoulders, knees, and shins, giving the armor kind of a more table-ready finish. Once the armor is done, we can dive into the details. I'm going to set up my wet palette, add some water and a fresh sheet of paper, and get to work on the yellow trim and Aquila. Yellow is always tricky. It needs to be thin and built up in multiple coats. Just remember to be patient and let each coat dry before adding the next. For better coverage, starting with a light gray base under that yellow can help, which I probably should have done and will do next time. The eyes get a gradient of dark red to light red, and yellow dots are put in the corners to get that lens look in the eyes. For the gun, I'm going to go with the original black and red, adding some silver to help certain details stand out. Once the base coats are on, I'll add a yellow knee pad just like the original. Between coats, I'll use bright blue to edge highlight the armor, making the most out of that drying time. The shoulders get multiple thin glazes of this color, starting about 2/3 of the way up the trim and pulling that paint towards the corners. The thin paint leaves just a little bit of color on the way down, and the rest gets deposited at the corners, leaving a stronger, more opaque color. Once we have a pretty even coverage on the brown, we can come back with the same yellow and do the exact same thing in the opposite direction, starting about the middle of that orange brown and ending at the top of the shoulder where it should be brightest. The colors will blend in the middle. We get a really nice shadow and highlight across all of the trim. Same thing goes for the knee pad too, and the Aquila, except I'm going to come back in with thicker paint to pick out the feathers on that Aquila as best I can. It's a little bit chewed up from whatever you kind of went through that needed the gun to cover it up, but with some paint defining the shadows and highlights, it should look pretty good by the end. The gun follows a similar treatment with brighter reds and yellow edge highlights for that extra pop of color. And finally, I'm going with the classic Goblin Green for the base, a nod to the model's origins that really completes the look. I like to think that this model was put together out of necessity, maybe rushed for a game even. The paint shows that the original owner knew some techniques, highlighting and shading, but probably needed a quick tabletop solution. The model served its purpose, and that's kind of the point. Now we get to restore it, adding to its story and connection to the hobby. Whether you think Space Marines are cool or not, they're iconic, and they're as serious or as dumb as you want them to be. And in this case, we're going to go with a little bit of both, and that's pretty cool to me. So thank you again for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this video with your hobby friends, and subscribing for more miniature rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. And here is the final Space Marine. Thanks again for watching.